My name is Holly Lee. I am a HR recruiting leader. I work for a lot of the FANG companies. My goal is to live stream twice a week, every Tuesday and every Friday for my leadership audience. Today, I have a special guest, which is David Anderson. He is a former Amazon technology leader and bar racer. I know that a lot of you have tons of questions regarding the Amazon BR. I also know that you have a lot of questions regarding the Amazon leadership principle in helping you, professional, land your dream role and leveling at Amazon. David, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. You spent over a decade at Amazon. You've been in a number
I
of
did.
different roles. If you could do an introduction of yourself so that our guests will know exactly who this BR is.
I started at Amazon in 2007 for those who are familiar with Amazon levels, level 5 dev manager. Moved through various groups, got promoted. I did leave Amazon for a brief period to go to Facebook, went back to Amazon, and then recently spent a year at Bezos Academy as the head of technology there. But the majority of my career, as you said, 10 years, funny enough, I had this dropped off by my wife yesterday. She said, "What do you want to do with this?" My red badge.
What is your responsibility as a BR? What do you evaluate?
Yeah, so first on the selection side, it's mostly around as a bar raiser, when you're looking for future bar raisers, you're looking for someone who has empathy and people skills in their interview process, high judgment, and generally demonstrating Amazon leadership principles. But looking for someone who can push back and help make decisions in the process. And when you're thinking about what is the bar raiser process in general, what's the purpose of the bar raiser? It's to set a standard bar across Amazon. I mean, the bar raiser, you're looking at how do you deal with a company that has hundreds of thousands of people doing interviews in different locations, in Seattle, in Texas, and try to have the same bar, because you want to be able to allow a high bar to be spread across the company without centralized interviewing or like 5 people in the central group making decisions. It just doesn't scale.
Just to let the audience know, not all bar racers are invited for global or international recruiting events. You have to be a BR for an X amount of time. When I say X, I mean seriously quite hundreds of interviews. I do teach interview training as a recruiting leader. At Amazon, there's a way to see how many interviews one has done with the percentage of incline and decline ratio. So we look at a lot of the historical data before we say, hey, David, I want you to go on the trip with us, because we know that we can rely on you and you know exactly what the bar is across all of Amazon and not just South America, for example. At one point, I was actually hanging out with international BR from like the Lux office, building out the Madrid location for us. I think we have actually reached out to you, David.
No.
You were
I
too
went to
busy.
Madrid. I didn't go to Barcelona. That's true. And I might have been because I had just recently gone on a trip. I remember being invited to Barcelona.
I remember being so desperate because we're hiring so many people for Amazon B2B that I
Yeah.
will reach out to every single PR in the book. And there's not a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
lot of them. That's why I say we reach out to them multiple times. So it has to hit your inbox. You BR for leadership position. That's generally how it works at Amazon. What are some of the common mistakes in leadership role that you have come across?
I would say is the most common is you mentioned star, so that's what pops in my head. People who talk about the actions they took without talking about the results, as in like the so what, as you like to call it, which is like, why did it matter that you did that? So many people will sit there and happily describe why they took some action, and I'm trying to piece together why they took the action. They're very proud of the action. It was like, as a hard action, it's like I had this emergency, and so I ran at 6 miles an hour for 15 hours straight. And you say, why? Why exactly were you working that hard? And then they stop and think, well, I'm not sure. And that's just in some ways embarrassing, and both a very bad answer for a leader is to say, I did something super hard and super expensive, and I'm not sure why I did it. And so I think that's you have to know what the problem is. You have to know the actions you took, and you have to know what the result was and why that mattered.
Creating your story, it's really important to, even before you start creating your story, you have to know what those leadership principles are. Just like in any employer, right? At Facebook, they have a leadership principle called customer centric, moving fast, bias for action, same thing.
An important thing to know is that every interviewer reads each other's questions and answers. And so if you use the same story the whole interview process, it sounds like you only did one thing your whole career, which, unless you're a college hire, is not the best idea. So I think that prepping your story and being able to have a very brief but crisp and data filled description of how you demonstrated that leadership principles.
If I were to interview for each audience, first I need to figure out as a hiring manager, what do they care about? I need to know their management styles. I wanting to know what is their expectations of me and in the role, and why is this role even opened? So I want to know as much as possible so that I can know exactly what I'm getting myself into. If I'm interviewing for the bar racer like David, perfect. That's even better for me. And because I know that the BR have been around, because they tell you they've been around for 10 years, 11 years, what are some of the changes that they have seen within the organization, and what other collaboration or cross-functional partnership that this person does with my team, my future team that I'm going into. You guys see where I'm going? So do not copy every single thing word by word, because David, let me tell you why I made that comment. I've received two different type of email messages from people that I don't even know at Amazon who are in recruiting leadership team, and say, Holly, one of your YouTube community member used your star template, and I know they didn't build a team in Austin. Because I'm like, no, they did not do that. So this is what I mean. Even David's blog, he has a lot of meat in there. So take a lot of the resources that's available to you guys with a grain of salt. And the intent is for you to gain knowledge and build your stories around that. Okay. The way, if you pay attention to the way how Amazonian write, it's very Amazonian. It's very obvious it's an Amazonian. So if you were to write your white paper, for example, Amazon writing exercise or assessment that you have to write, do not do that, because they know you're not Amazon. They can tell where those writing skills are coming from. Okay. So with that said, David.
Oh, yeah. I think that Amazon focuses really heavily on aptitude and your ability to learn, not so much your exact skills coming in.
Yep. During the debrief, how appropriate that you're asking about the debrief. If everyone says yes to hire, but the BR, David here, decided to say no, vice versa, who wins?
Well, preferably there's no winning. I think it's a big failure of the bar raiser and really everyone else in the loop if you can't sort of agree that the right answer is X. The votes at the beginning are really just the starting place at a debrief, because you have a very limited, your votes are made with only your own feedback. Just the way the tool works, you put your vote in before you're allowed to see other people's feedback. And so you asked your questions, you get a certain feel for the candidate, you decide if they raise the bar in those two leadership principles, or the leadership principle and that technical assessment. And then at the beginning of the debrief, you sit there and read the questions that everyone else asked and the candidate's answers and the assessment from that interviewer. And so the debrief sort of starts with saying, okay, so here was the votes. And yes, plenty of times it's been everyone else is inclined and the bar raiser is not inclined. But then the discussion starts, and the bar raiser is, one of their main jobs is to facilitate the discussion. And so there's going to be a deep discussion about, we all seem to agree that they are doing quite well in this area that you can be confident that it's about sort of like risk management. I'm not terribly worried about their communication skills and their ability to earn trust with their coworkers, but I am sort of worried about their bias for action. It seems like they are very careful about every single decision they've made, and they need a lot of data. Does anyone else have feedback on more signal they saw beyond this? And so it's a pretty rare situation where you have to make a decision at the end and everyone disagrees with the bar raiser. But the short answer is, if everyone says no and the bar raiser is still saying yes, the bar raiser can't hire in a vacuum. You need a hiring manager to say that they want to hire. The decision, as a side note, in the hiring decision at the end of a debrief, is the bar raiser and the hiring manager both have to say yes. Like that. That's how it ends. So preferably, and in all situations where you don't feel like a loser as a bar raiser, the hiring manager and the bar raiser agree in the end.
But for graduate program, they are handled with the university team. And generally, it's more of a pod interview. Pod meaning meaning panel interviewed. Of course, the type of question they don't expect you to know how to run the operation at a fulfillment center. I'm going to assume that you've never had those experiences before because at Amazon, it is the one company that I love. As long as you have a bachelor's degree, you're qualified to be an area manager at Amazon. That's how it works. They're looking for a lot of the key component that David just mentioned earlier, which is your bias for action, your ownership. I've had a couple of folks before in my cohort who landed more junior level position that is using their academia back. What did you build? Preferably, you don't need to have operational experiences. How are you able to think big in solving projects? Let me give you guys an example. But one of my engineer, it was so amazing because she was building some kind of devices to help medical doctors to figure out diseases. I'm like, oh my god, what? And you have no confidence? I'm like, yes, you can get a job at Amazon. That's brilliant. And then we have to work backward in her telling her story with more meat. You're thinking about getting a job at Amazon. Don't think about just area manager, the role that you don't have any experience on. What have you done at your academia background that demonstrate you owning the project, even your thesis? Did you leverage a team? Did you complete it as a team? Did you win any award? Do you have any patents? Anything you want to share? Basically, they're looking at smart people who is productive and who knows that you will be coming in asking great questions to get ramp up.
Yeah, I just double down on especially early career interviews. They're looking for someone who can figure things out and learn things. Moving within Amazon is very frequent, and you have people move to groups where they know nothing about the space, and you just assume they'll figure it out because they were hired at Amazon. And that means they're smart and they like to learn things and they can figure things out. I remember someone I interviewed once who said, what language, what code, was a software engineer, a pretty senior software engineer, in fact. And I remember them saying, what language are we going to be coding in? And I said, well, currently Java, but it could be anything. And he said, well, I really only like to code in C++. Is there any job for C++ coding? And I essentially said no, because there's no one at Amazon where it's acceptable to say, I only do X and I refuse to learn something new. C++ is not terribly different than Java, if you don't know. It's different, but someone to say, I don't want to learn something new is like the opposite of what you want for someone to come to Amazon. When I went to devices, the kids group is in devices group. I'd never done anything to do with devices or mobile technology or anything, and I figured it out. And same thing when I went to AWS and did networking. As I told them, I'm probably on the bottom half of technology people in regards to knowing anything about how networks work or packets move around, and you figure it out. And so I think that that's one of the biggest things they're looking for is I had this problem and then I figured it out, and the I figured it out part is the thing that everyone's looking for.
If you haven't already, I don't know why you haven't subscribed to this channel yet. In this channel, as you can hear what David is saying, it's all about the how getting you the resources as quick as possible. Who is the bar racer? Jaden, I'm going to take this and let our BR take a deep breath. The goal is to not figure out who the bar racer is, just like how you don't figure out who the hiring manager is, okay? The goal is to be utmost button up and prepare on storytelling on what you've done. Because if you don't know your achievement and how you got to your achievement, it's not just a bar raiser, even a peer-to-peer interview, they're all trained to interview. To be an interviewer at Amazon, you have to pass a serious round of interview, knowing how to interview. But first, writing very compelling feedback, because if you don't, the bar raiser will call you out during a debrief, and you really should button up as an interviewer. So to answer your question, Jaden, you don't know who the bar racer is. And David mentioned earlier that it actually makes him uncomfortable when people figure out that he's a bar racer. They get really tense and nervous. Don't be afraid. They're just BR.
If you're curious, you can figure it out, I'm sure. Some orgs actually sort of moved away. There used to be this big thing about it being a secret and don't let anyone figure out who the bar raiser is. Nowadays, most orgs say, like, if someone asks you, you can just tell them. But the biggest thing they emphasize also, the same thing you've been saying, is, but it doesn't matter. Yes, I'm the BR, but it doesn't matter. This should just be a nice, comfortable interview, just like anyone else. The one thing I have told people regularly as the BR is I'm the one person you probably don't want to ask a lot of detailed questions about the job itself, just because I'm, by definition, not going to be on the same team as the team that they're joining. And so frequently it might be, the Alexa wake word team about like how does
Mhm.
Alexa wake up, and I'm the bar raiser for that. I'm the one person out of those interviewers who does not know how the wake word team works and what their sprint schedule is or any of these other kind of questions you might ask. And so, which would actually be a bad question to ask at the end of an interview, by the way.
Yep.
But that would be the one thing I would hint is like I'm the person who's not on the team. That's usually the bar raiser, but you should definitely not be doing an interview differently than with anyone else in the loop.
But on a side note, David, I was a boomerang myself too, and I can tell who the bar raiser is right
Oh
off the
yeah, for
bat.
sure. I mean,
If
yeah,
you're a boomerang, meaning when if you used to work for Amazon, you just kind of there's just they're very I'm not okay. You know what? I'm not even going to tell you guys because I don't want you to waste your effort trying to figure out what Holly just said. But yes,
they tend to be the best interviewer. So I
they
think that
are. They tend
sometimes
to
you
be
could
the
just say like,
toughest
"Oh,
interviewer of your day.
I don't know. I wouldn't say toughest. I think so. If I say, tell me about a time, whatever, and you talk for 30 seconds and I say, thanks, moving on, I'm probably not the bar raiser because I don't view
They
it
like
as
to dive
sufficient
deep. Yep.
questioning. And you mentioned something earlier about like if someone asks the same question 3 times, you've made a mistake. The same question 3 times, for sure you're making a mistake. Oh my God, would you listen to me? It drives me crazy. Sorry, I'm just passionate about when this happens. It bothers me so much when I'll say,
David, you know you're one of the nicer BR, right? I've
oh yeah,
shadowed
but
quite a number of BRs.
I've lost my patience in a few interviews and certainly in the feedback and debrief on some candidates when they clearly not listening. And so please listen to the person asking questions because I've said,
Yep.
tell me about a time you launched something. And they start talking about a time when they had this idea. And I said, okay, yeah, but I want you to tell me about a time you launched something. They're like, okay, so I had this idea the other day. Did you launch it? Let's not even keep talking anymore. Tell me about a time you launched something. What did you launch? And so if I'm asking the same question, big problem. But probing questions are very important, and
Hmm.
every good interviewer should do it. But bar raiser will do it more, which is, and tell me why you did that, and what was the result, and who worked with you on that, and what did you do later, and how did you know it worked, and what happened 3 months later. And so those kind of follow up questions are just us trying to probe for details and make sure that we understand the situation from the various
I
angles.
mean, I just love my BR interviewed. Sometimes I just wish that I could just hang out with a BR because they just love to. It's not about diving deep probing questions. They just like to have a conversational flow where you actually have a good. They're actually training you, transitioning into the right to get you through the entire interview without you even knowing. And they
Yeah,
tend to put a lot more work into it in helping you get there versus a lot of the peer to peer or even hiring manager interview because they're evaluating you for very specific competencies.
yeah,
If they don't make it, they don't necessarily spend the time to dig deeper and help you get there. That's just my personal experiences. Take it as a grain of salt. I've shadowed with 3 different org, and I was one of those very anal recruiter when I was an IC, and I was even more anal when I was a recruiting leader. Where if I'm supporting you, David, I know you've been a BR for a long time. I still want to shadow you because I want to learn your interview style, so I could help my team in prepping the right candidate for you. That's why recruiters also work really hard. So it's a case by case basis. But BR, let me tell you guys, they're very buttoned up. Buttoned up meaning they are very polished by the way they ask questions. BR or not, some of them are they're gentle soul, and then you get one that is very, I want to use the word A type. So that is true. But it's funny because I know they're BR, but depending on my answer, and I looked at her, she would just smile at me, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a BR. I get it.
oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm
That's
like,
another
you
that
know,
is
it's like, you know, the smile that you guys do is like,
well, the
it's
BR
like, oh,
thing,
you
which
just
is
got it.
one of the things I've told people in the bar program is preferably the candidate at all times thinks that they're doing awesome, whether they are or not. And so this is something to watch out for is if you're doing an interview right, I'm not frowning and shaking my head at the end of a question. You should never get that. That'd be weird if you got that signal. So you may have a terrible answer. I'm still going to do my best per the feedback thing of like, as an experienced person who knows that they are not going to get any specific feedback, my job is to find out if they meet the bar. I'm going to ask a lot of grilling questions to hopefully walk them to the point where I can be very sure that they are or not going to be successful at Amazon. And if I think they're not, I still want them to end it. I had such a good time. It was such an interesting interview, and they had so many good questions for me, and it was not stressful. It was fun. And so, um, that would be one of the things that I would say is definitely a bar raiser thing, that most bar raisers will not let you know if you're doing a great job or not.
HR org, recruiting is also part of HR. We're not really getting the love that we have, David. Okay, I feel like because our hands are everywhere from hiring, and then a lot of us are BR, and I was an interview trainer at Amazon as well, and then we do international event, which I love, and then we also partner with HR and we do training and we do all of this stuff. So that's why you have to have a number of serious different example how you're able to influence your stakeholders.
Thinking of the leadership principles they will definitely not skip would be things like earns trust, because as you were talking about, like, it's all about building relationships and earning trust with people.
Mhm.
You can't give someone feedback if they don't trust you, and so you have to be able to earn that with everyone. And then developing people. HR is all about development, and so that whole hire and develop the best principle is definitely going to be asked for an HR partner.
Can you tell how passionate I am when it comes to HR topics? It doesn't matter what position you're interviewing for at Amazon. It doesn't matter if you're interviewing with a BR or not. It does matter if you know what you have done to a T. It does matter if you're thinking about all your example. You guys have to start thinking about specific detail. When I hired and built the team from ground up for the B2B team of 25 to about 500 within a year and a half, it is now a $2+ billion business. And that was my effort and my team's effort. So when you're telling a story, you have to really make sure, if you don't have the dollars now, I didn't make $2 billion for Amazon, but it was because of my effort. And now work backward and start creating every single thing that you've done to lead up to that dollar amount.
Don't get too obsessed with the word customer, because sometimes people think they're actually referring to retail customers. It's just there's always someone you're working with and the things you're doing benefit someone, and that's the customer. And that could be literally a customer, or it could be not a customer at all. It could be the people down the hallway. And so thinking about them and the impact you've made is one of the ways to come up with those clear examples of when have I ever impacted anyone else other than me at the company in a positive way, and tell the story from the beginning in a short way. And I think, like, tossing out the one sort of pro tip along what you're talking about is, no matter what, most of the people on the loop all want to find someone they want to work with on a day-to-day basis. And so they want to believe that you can make an impact at Amazon, and they want to work with you. And so along the way, not obsessing too much on driving your story out fast as possible and saying, did that answer your question? Can you give me an A+ now? Just think, like, you want to have a conversation with them, go back and forth, answer the questions, clarify things for them, make sure that you're coming across as a person who looks at your goals are and tries to achieve them in a team worth of people, and that they should want you on their team because you can help them achieve their goals.
If you are waiting for the Amazon recruiter, either for a phone screen, for an on-site, for an offer that's pending, don't be afraid. Just follow up with them. They're human, just like us. And David mentioned something wonderful. Bar raiser, recruiter, leaders, doesn't matter. A lot of them have failed the interview 3 times, 4 times, 5 times even. I know that because I've helped a lot of them before they landed a job at Amazon. So don't be afraid to follow up with your recruiter.